I've noticed that when I've gone to other candidate forums, like in San Jose or Sunnyvale, where it's the district is a lot more compact. There's a lot more people. Less people show up. It seems to me the small towns, the rural, that's where most people are.
There's more of a culture. Town hall.
Good evening, and thank you for coming to tonight's candidate forum. My name is Margot Hinnenkamp.
And I'm Bobby Graham.
And we are co-presidents of American Association of University Women, the Morgan Hill branch. And just to tell you a little bit about AAUW, our goal is to advance equity for girls and women through advocacy, education, and research. The Morgan Hill Times, your local newspaper in Morgan Hill since 1894, is co-sponsoring this forum with us tonight. And we are encouraging community discussion and want to introduce voters to the candidates and to the issues. We have some helpers tonight, and those are fellow AAUW members Sharon Frentner, Yvonne Duckett, Mary Hellman, Peggy Thompson, and Beth Wyman, and Carol O'Hare. And some of these folks will be circulating through the audience, so that if you have a card you have filled out with a question for the candidate, when you see people circulating, just hold up your card and they will pick it up. Time is short, so we only have time for a few questions from the audience, but we'll do our best to get them all answered. Our moderators this evening are Joanne Reif and Carol Holzgraf, AAUW members. Also, we have Lisa Pampich, who is a columnist for the Morgan Hill Times and an AAUW member. Laura Brunton, our timer this evening, is a member of AAUW. We have a lot to cover in 2 hours, and so we would like our candidates to adhere to these rules, unlike what you've seen on TV lately, that we have all agreed upon. The opening statements, each candidate gets 1.5 minutes. The prepared questions, they have 1 minute to answer. The questions from the audience, 1 minute to answer, and the closing statements, 1 minute each. Seated on the dais this evening are candidates for the 27th Assembly District, the seat currently held by John Laird, who is termed out, and Joanne Reif will moderate this panel. The second panel includes the 3 candidates for Morgan Hill City Council, moderated by Carol Holzgraf. The third event has 2 candidates for the Open Space Authority, and the fourth is Mayor Steve Tate and a member of the public, Art College, discussing the pros and cons of Measure G. And those final 2 panels will be moderated by Lisa Pampich. Lisa has organized the initial questions for the evening. Our timer, Laura Brunton, will let the panelists know when they have 15 seconds left by raising a yellow card. The red card means, please finish quickly, we don't want to get out the hook. We will now turn the microphone over to Joanne Reif.
Thank you, Margot and Bobby, and thank you all for coming too. We have 3 candidates for the State Assembly, the 27th District, to replace Assemblyman John Laird, and they are Democrat Bill Moaning, an attorney and professor of law from Carmel, Republican Robert Murray, a lawyer and businessman from Morgan Hill, and Libertarian Mark Hinkle, a small business owner from Morgan Hill. And we'll start right off with the opening statement of 1.5 minutes, and I'll ask Mr. Moaning to start with that.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Bill Moaning. I'm Democratic nominee in the 27th Assembly District. I appreciate the opportunity this evening to join you. I want to thank the American Association of University Women, the co-chairs, and our moderator this evening, Joanne. Our time is limited. Let me just highlight what I hope to achieve in representing the entire 27th Assembly District, which includes, as you know, parts of southern Santa Clara County, including Morgan Hills, San Martin, parts of unincorporated Gilroy. First, I want to acknowledge the work of John Laird in representing this region and this district. He's achieved quite a bit in Sacramento, but I think perhaps his greatest achievement is his service to the district. And one of my commitments is to make sure that I continue in that constituent representation of being available to the residents of the 27th Assembly District here in southern Santa Clara County. I'm compelled to run. I'm an attorney by training and background. I'm currently a professor of International Relations, Negotiation, and Conflict Resolution at the Monterey Institute of International Studies and the Monterey College of Law. I want to bring a new culture of mediation both to Sacramento and to the state of California in promoting new forms of mediation, peer mediation, and K through 12 education, a host of issues, our economy, the environment, education. I'm sure I'll have a chance to address some of those this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Murray.
Hi, I'm Robert Murray. I'm the Republican candidate. First of all, I want you to know I'm not a career politician. I've never held public office. I don't have any political experience. I say that as a positive, not as a negative. As a matter of fact, I think most people who hear that say that's your best qualification for running. But despite not having held political office, I do have some relevant background. I have a bachelor's degree in political science, and I did some policy studies at MIT's Center for Technology Policy and Industrial Development, looking at the safety of pesticides. I studied legislation in law school, and early in my career I was retained to draft legislation that was supported by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and eventually passed by the legislature. My general philosophy is lower spending and lowering taxes, or if not lowering, at least not increasing taxes. The four priorities that I want to focus on are education, budget reform, promoting green industry and the use of green technology in the 27th District and California in general, and litigation reform. Within education, my priorities there are supporting local control and not state control, vouchers for homeschooling, vouchers for private schools, charter schools, and supporting universal state-supported voluntary preschool. That's it. Okay.
Mr. Hinkle.
Good evening, and again, thank you to the association. They have a long record of putting on candidates forums, and particularly for a member of a third party, I very much appreciate being invited not only tonight but in the past to address not only the TV audience but the great turnout that you've got here tonight. So thanks very much. I'm running for the state assembly because, for one thing, I'm not a career politician. In fact, I'm not one of the lawyers on the dais up here. But I did spend 30 years in the high-tech business. When the high-tech business was done with me, I decided to go into a small business. I installed pool fencing to prevent kids from drowning. And when I went into the small business arena, I found that the government had put up lots of roadblocks. If I were legally doing business in every jurisdiction, I'd have to get a business license in every town and city that is in my territory, and that literally would consume my entire profits for the year. There are so many roadblocks to what government does for creating jobs that's one of the areas that I would like to see, is to eliminate those roadblocks. There are over 4,000 jobs that you have to give government permission to go into those fields in order to go into those fields, and I don't think that's right and proper, particularly in these hard economic times. And clearly, state legislature, the approval rating is at all-time low, like Congress, so I'm hoping that people will look to an alternative, and that be the Libertarian Party. Thanks.
Our first question, and I will ask this first of Mr. Murray. 1 minute answer, please. What 3 steps would you recommend to cure the state's chronic budget woes?
Actually, for budget reform, I support the current proposal by the Assembly Republicans. And let me first mention, in the last 4 years, state spending has increased 44%. I mean, that's far above any increase in population, inflation. I mean, just 44% increase is too much. If you just stop the increase in spending, you don't have to increase taxes at all. Just stop the increase. Hold where we are. What the Republican proposal is have a rainy day fund, have spending limits, and the spending limits would be tied to population increase and inflation. Any revenues collected over the spending limits would be put into the rainy day fund, and then that rainy day fund could be used when the revenues and the spending don't match up in future years.
Mr. Henkel, same question.
All right, in 1 minute, quickly. First of all, we have a spending problem. Robert is absolutely correct. The inflation and population growth have been far outstripped by the revenue growth, so it's not, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem, and it needs to be brought under control. Second of all, the priorities. I think if we have a state legislature that by either constitutional amendment is not paid after the July 1 deadline, if they don't meet that deadline, they don't get paid. And lastly, I think one of the major problems we have is we are sending far too much money to the state and federal. People want government services provided at the local level. Let's keep that money here, not send it to Sacramento, not send it to Washington, D.C. Local control. You guys can come down before your city council, your school board, and various districts and lobby for projects that really need prioritizing. If you send it to Sacramento, there's 3,500 paid lobbyists that are going to stop you.
And Mr. Monning.
Yes, the 3 steps that I would advocate for budget reform. The gridlock that we've faced is rooted in the fact that we need a 2/3 majority of both houses to pass a state budget. We're one of only 3 states in the country, joined by Arkansas and Rhode Island. That guarantees gridlock because it gives absolute veto power to a minority of those elected by the people of California. If a majority of the people elected by the people of California can reach consensus on a budget, we should be able to put that into operation and not starve local governments, local programs, child care, schools from getting their budget money that they count on. I would support a 2-year budget cycle. We're the 8th largest economy in the world, at least we were before this financial crisis, and we should be able to manage a budget over a 2-year period. Finally, we are dependent on the revenue of personal income tax and sales tax, and as our economy fluctuates, so too does the revenue that comes into the state, but growth continues. Thank you.
All right, the next question, starting with Mr. Henkel. How, if at all, should the state's role in public education be changed?
I would eliminate any bureaucracy up in Sacramento. Again, harking back to my local control. Rather than send the money up to Sacramento and beg to get it back, let's keep it here on the local level where you can control what's going on in your local schools. The money that goes to Sacramento is the money that comes from you and me. So rather than funnel it through a bureaucracy in Sacramento, let's keep it here locally and have all the funding and all the control remain local control.
Mr. Monning, please.
Yes, I think the state role in public education should be to guarantee equity between school districts of different economic means so that all children have an opportunity to a quality education. I'd also favor state support for preschool education. There are clear indications, clear data that shows the trajectory of a child is rooted in their vocabulary acquisition in pre-kindergarten learning. It's a family obligation and responsibility. It's also a responsibility that can be addressed through early childhood education, which I would favor. I also, as a particular interest, want to promote the introduction of basic conflict resolution skills in K through 12, peer mediation. This can reduce truancy, suspension, expulsions, and reduce violence. Thank you.
And Mr. Murray.
I have a feeling I'm somewhere in between the 2 positions here. I agree with local control, and the funding should be at the local level, but I don't think I would totally disband in the system we have up in Sacramento right now. Mr. Monning is also correct about the universal preschool. I would actually move preschool funding into the K through 12 system, so it becomes part of the educational funding, and it's absolutely necessary because the money that we will save in the long term, and I think there's been an estimate of a study done that if you do institute universal preschool, you'll save $70 billion over the next 10 years from K through 12 education. the one thing that I strongly support is the use of vouchers, and that way the control can go back into the hands of the parents, and they can decide what's the best way to educate their children.
All right, the next question, starting with Mr. Monning. What specifically will you do to help South County deal with its two major water issues? One, the eliminating percolate contamination and obtaining compensation from the polluter, and finishing the half-century-old and long-abandoned Yagas Creek Flood Control Project, known as PL 566.
Yes, thank you. On the perchlorate issue, I'm familiar with the history of that and the current status of seeking mitigation measures from the Owen Company. I think there's been, from my view, a relatively good collaboration, not involving litigation, but I think there's still a long way to go to achieve total decontamination of the aquifers, both mid-level and deep aquifers that have been contaminated. I know there's been use of reverse ionization that has proved effective. The key is monitoring, and the key is anticipating to make sure that we're not discovering contaminated wells after the fact. I spent a lot of my professional career working in the Salinas Valley on toxic issues, often in litigation, often in public policy reform, and it takes an entire community being vigilant. It takes corporate polluters being responsible, and it takes a partnership with government. I know that the perchlorate issue, my time is up. I'm sorry I didn't get to the second issue.
Mr. Murray.
My understanding is that the remediation measures are continuing and are continuing on a satisfactory basis. And obviously the contributors to the perchlorate situation are the ones that need to foot the bill. I would say that if there are situations where the money cannot come from the private sector, cannot come from the contributors, state funding is necessary for remediation measures. The more important thing, I mean, I know where it's sort of we're looking at it after the fact, is that we do need to have, and this is I'll probably disagree with Mr. Hinkle, we do need to have regulation in place so that this doesn't happen in the future, not just here in Morgan Hill, but throughout California. So there is a necessity for environmental regulation.
And Mr. Hinkle.
Yeah, I agree with Robert. I think strict liability for those who do pollute needs to be enforced by our laws. I mean, clearly they are doing damage, property damage. But let me give you an example of where I think the government can overstep its bounds and actually cause problems. I used to work for a little company up the road called IBM. IBM had some pretty nasty chemicals that they used in the disk manufacturing business. These tanks sat above ground, and whenever they were used, or whenever there were leaks, they were easily spotted. But the fire marshal of the city of San Jose said, hey, that's a fire hazard, and they ordered IBM to bury them. Well, you know what happened. When they buried those tanks, they leaked. Nobody knew they leaked, and that caused some significant groundwater pollution. IBM then had to dig up the tanks. They also had to sink something like 25 or 30 wells, costing several millions of dollars, which in itself caused additional problems because, as you probably know, I'm out of my time.
Our next question is from the audience, and we'll start with Mr. Murray. Do you support Proposition 8, the initiative to take away the right of same-sex couples to marry?
I do support Proposition 8. I was heavily criticized by the Morgan Hill Times for taking that position. They called me an ideologue with extreme views. If that's the case, then I believe somewhere between 45 to 55%, maybe even more, of the people out here in this audience and in the 27th District have extreme views. I think there's a difference between tolerance and acceptance. Everybody is for tolerance. Nobody's going to deny that. But what this is asking, what the current situation is with supporting same-sex marriage, is asking people not just to be tolerant, but to accept something that they are not ready to accept, and really enforcing the will of the minority on the majority.
And Mr. Hinkle.
I'm very much opposed to Prop 8. Frankly, you know, the reason why we have marriage licenses, in other words, you have to get permission from the government in order to get married in the first place. You know why? It's because they didn't want whites to marry blacks. The origin of the marriage licensing laws here in the United States were racist. And during my lifetime, in a Supreme Court ruling of Loving versus New Jersey, the last laws that prevented whites from marrying blacks were outlawed by the Supreme Court. The government should not be involved in determining who marries who. It's none of their business.
And Mr. Monning.
I'm also strongly opposed to Proposition 8. I believe that the conservative majority of the California Supreme Court appropriately interpreted the California Constitution and the U.S. Constitution in recognizing the right of same-sex couples to marry, that it's an individual right protected by an extension of constitutional rights. To use the ballot measure to take away a constitutionally recognized right is, I think, a wrong use of a ballot measure. You know, I personally think that a lot of the people who have made this such an important issue to try to deny people who are in love with each other to be protected by the institution of marriage and to enjoy the institution of marriage might do better to work on their own marriages as opposed to worry about how other people wish to conduct their lives. So I oppose Proposition 8. I think there's more important things for us to be focusing on in this state. We should recognize the right of loving couples to marry.
All right, the next question is in regard to green technology, and this will go to Mr. Hinkle. What government incentives, if any, would you provide to initiate a green technology revolution?
Well, actually, the first thing I'd like to do is remove the disincentives. A couple of years ago, I worked for a solar company, and there was an apartment complex up in San Jose that wanted to have solar hot water heating. I said, great. I called up the city of San Jose. Not only did they want an 8% surcharge for the permit to install the solar, but they want 8% sales tax on top of it. So that's a 16% disincentive. And as it turned out, the return on investment for the apartment owner was not sufficient because of that disincentive, and the project never went through. So those are sort of things that we need to remove the roadblocks that are currently exist by our local government and our state government. And I think the solar technologies will be much more cost effective if we get those roadblocks out of the way.
Mr. Monning.
Yes, I favor government incentives for the promotion of green technology, green building, alternative energy sources. I think this is an excellent area for California to rebuild our economy, to build government-private partnerships between private industry and government. We should create incentives for people who pursue LEED certification in construction projects. They should be eligible for either waived permit fees, reductions in property tax assessments because of the contribution to the elimination of CO2 emissions. We're under a collective governor-promoted mandate to reduce CO2 emissions, Assembly Bill 32, to reduce by the year 2020 back to the levels of 1990. We also need to introduce green technology job training in our high schools, in our community colleges, in our junior colleges, so that students of today are getting the training they need to be contributors and to find jobs in green technology work. Thank you.
And Mr. Murray.
Yeah, as I mentioned in my opening, green technology and the green industry is an important part of what I'm running for. I want to mention that I was in the field of green technology. I did graduate research in environmental research, which won the Nobel Prize. So this is a very strong position of mine. It's I agree with Mr. Monning. I mean, there's ways to do this. Tax credits is one way. If builders are using green technology, reduce permitting fees. I think the more information that's out there to the consumer is also a good thing. So you could have government legislation to allow for information going out to the consumer. I'll give you an example. Would be, it's going to be too long to give the example, so.
All right, the third question from the audience, and this will go first to Mr. Monning. How will you, and this refers back to an unanswered question, how will you help Morgan Hill deal with the 50-year delayed flood control program that PL 566, which would mitigate downtown flooding?
Well, I'm keenly aware of the history of the problem. I'm also aware of some of the work that Congressman McNerney has done to try to secure federal support for the flood mitigation measures. Congressman McNerney has endorsed my candidacy. I look forward to working with him and playing the partnership role of the state in addressing these issues in the local community.
All right, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I'm aware of the efforts to get federal funding, and that's necessary. I think it's a bigger issue though in terms of flood control. It really goes to our whole concept here in California of water and our water infrastructure, and how are we going to supply water and protect the floodplains, not just here in Morgan Hill, but throughout California. We need an overall approach, and we need to build infrastructure to deliver water. We need infrastructure to protect the levees. All this is going to cost money. Unfortunately, I don't say raising taxes for that. That's going to be bond measures to do that. And one thing that it's also going to require is above ground storage, which for some reason the Democrats just veto every single time.
And Mr. Hinkle.
Yeah, it seems to me that if this is a priority to the citizens of Morgan Hill, then they ought to look to their local elected officials and get it done. Clearly, it's not a priority to them, and it doesn't seem to be a priority to the state government. And now, either that means that at the local level, people are not interested in the flooding, and they're just going to take what comes when it comes. But it's clear that the local officials and how they set their priorities, I think, are not in tune with the local populace, and I think you need to replace them if they are not going to do that.
Moving right ahead here, we are going to go to closing statements, and these are 1 minute, please, and we will start with Mr. Murray.
I want to thank everybody for coming out here. I know the national elections get all the media and all the publicity, but it's the local elections that really, city council, open space, assembly, those are the things that are going to affect your day-to-day life, so I appreciate everybody coming out. As voters on this assembly race, you're very lucky. You have 3 good choices here. You have people that are smart, competent. They really hit, all of us have the best interests of the 27th district at heart. But we all have completely different approaches to state government. I think my approach of less spending, less taxes is more in tune for what the voters of Morgan Hill want. So I'm going to encourage everybody to come out on November 4th and vote for me. But if you don't come out and vote for me, please come out and vote for somebody. It's very important.
Mr. Hinkle.
I'm delighted that people turned out. I hate to sort of deliver some bad news, but you know this election really is already over. It was decided back in June. This district is so heavily gerrymandered that it is actually guaranteed whoever wins the Democratic primary is in fact going to be the next assemblyman. Bill Monning is already going up to Sacramento. He's very comfortable with the idea that he's going to be the next state assemblyman. And in fact, that is the case. And there's virtually nothing you can do about it because of the gerrymandering. The fix is in. Both the Republicans and Democrats have gerrymandered California so that without term limits, there would be virtually no turnover in the state legislature. And that's something that denies you your choice. It really denies everybody a competitive district. So you really don't have much of a choice in the 27th Assembly District. In the 28th Assembly District, there's one candidate. And that's akin to what we disliked in the Soviet Union. Thanks very much.
And Mr. Monning, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, I also want to again thank the association for providing this forum. I want to thank all of you for being here this evening. I want to thank Mark Hinkle for his strong vote of confidence. And I've really enjoyed actually attending these forums with both Mark and Robert, and I would agree with Robert. There's very strong commitment up here. I'm not taking this election, I'm not complacent, I'm not taking anything for granted. I'm working, I'm attending every forum, I'm knocking on doors because I want to represent you. I want to represent the communities of Morgan Hill, San Martin, unincorporated Gilroy, and to work in a partnership of reviving participatory democracy, because that's what we've lost in this country. I'm honored by the endorsements of Congressman McNerney, Mayor Steve Tate, Alex Kennett, Council Members Carr and Sellers. I was honored by the endorsement of the Morgan Hill Times, endorsement of Kathy Sullivan and others. You can see all those endorsements on my website, www.billmonning.org. Thank you. I'd be honored by your vote on November 4th.
Well, thank you for your insightful answers, and good luck come November 4th. And the next moderator is Carol Holtzgraf.
Will all of the candidates for City Council please come up to the dais?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have, as you see, the three candidates for the Morgan Hill City Council who are vying for 2 open seats. From left to right, for those of you who actually can't see the little signs there, they're very nice signs, but they are small. First of all, we have on your left Larry Carr, who is the incumbent. This would be he's running for his 3rd term as city councilman. Larry is, in his day job, the Public Affairs Associate Vice President at San Jose State University. In education, he has a BA, I believe, in Public Relations and a minor in Poli-Sci, which is probably useful. In the middle is Mark Grazan, also an incumbent running for his 2nd term. Mark is a teacher and administrator also at San Jose State University. Do you ride in the van together? Mark has a master's in public administration. And on your right is the newcomer, Marilyn Libris, who is only new to running for city council. She's not new to Morgan Hill, certainly. Marilyn is the nonprofit director for the Pochon Research Foundation. And she has some college. Hey, it's important. So we are going to do the same thing as Joanne did with the 27th district. Folks, we have 1.5 minutes for your opening statement, and let us start with Larry on the left here. We'll revolve.
Okay, well, thank you, Carol. Thank you very much. Thank you to the AAUW and the Morgan Hill Times for sponsoring this important forum tonight. Carol, thanks for coming back to moderate again. We always appreciate seeing you at these times. Marilyn and Mark, thank you both. It's an honor to be up here with you tonight. Thank you. And those in attendance and watching at home, thank you for taking time out of not only a Monday night football game, but your busy lives to join us tonight. These are important times when it is election season for us. I'm a Morgan Hill resident and have been for most of my life. I grew up here in Morgan Hill and am now raising my 2 children here in Morgan Hill. I'm an experienced city council member, the father of 2 young kids, 9 and 6. Morgan Hill is my home. I'm proud of the service that I have to the community of Morgan Hill, both on this city council and previously on the school board. I have a track record that has focused on improving the quality of life here in Morgan Hill, the reason that so many of us have not only come to Morgan Hill but chose to make Morgan Hill our homes. In order to do that, we've balanced the city's budget year after year here in Morgan Hill. We've expanded recreation programs, including public facilities, and we've expanded economic development in Morgan Hill, including improvements to our downtown that is so important. And of course, we've worked on public safety, an important issue that we'll hear a lot more about later, but something that I think all of us up here tonight will talk a little bit about. And so I have a lot that I believe I have to continue to offer to this community that is my home and where I'm raising my kids. and I hope to continue to be a part of that public service. Thank you.
Mark?
Well, a little less than 4 years ago, I looked at this wonderful community and wondered how it could be sustained. The city was itself facing many challenges and uncertainties. We had Coyote Valley that was going to overtake our overspace and add congestion to our downtown. The collapse of the dot-com era was looking at Morgan Hill as another conquest. And there are projections of deficits, reductions in services, increases in fees and taxes, and potential layoffs. Today, I look back from where we came, and we survived the crash. We did not have to reduce services to the nature and extent that is envisioned. We finished our library. We built a Centennial Recreation Center. We opened a state-of-the-art public safety facility. We significantly reduced our fees as an economic incentive, and in one instance, as my urging, returned fees to those who made investments to alternative energy. We are in a multi-million-dollar process of expanding our high-tech and award-winning wastewater treatment plant in Gilroy, and I'm pleased to announce in recent months, 75% of the entire wastewater stream from the city of Gilroy was reclaimed. We did this and more with the lowest number of employees per capita than any other community around. But there is much to be done. There are new challenges with the environment, housing, economic and redevelopment efforts in downtown, transportation, and public safety. The city is focused and it realizes that public safety is a priority, and I support Measure G. With over 25 years of public fiscal administration, I believe I'm the best candidate to serve this city and keep it solvent. I'm pleased to announce that I have the endorsement of the Sierra Club, the California League of Conservation Voters, and our very own Morgan Hill Times. I'm here tonight to bring responsible leadership to this community and protect your interests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Marilyn, your minute and a half.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marilyn Liebers, and I've lived in Morgan Hill for 31 years. I have raised my family here, and I have been active in the community that entire time. For the past 6 years, I've served as a Parks and Recs Commissioner, and I served 2 consecutive terms as the chair of that commission. I am also on the board of directors for the Community Foundation, and I am a member of the Rotary Club here in Morgan Hill. Rotary's motto is service above self, and I try to live my life by that. In the past, I've been on the board of directors for United Way, and also for Community Solutions, which is one of the largest mental health agencies in the South County. 2 years ago, I was appointed by the City Council to serve on the Centennial Committee, and that was a year-long celebration of our city's 100th birthday. It was a lot of fun. I am the nonprofit director. I am the director of a nonprofit foundation here in Morgan Hill, and I have strong fiscal management skills, because I manage a budget every day of quite a large portfolio. I also have leadership skills. And I also have a lot of friends and relationships in the Morgan Hill area. I think relationships, building those, are really important. I think that that will make me a good council person because I am willing to listen.
Thank you very much. Now we have 3 questions. We will rotate whichever one of you starts first. Why don't we have Marilyn Liebers start with the first question? Other than actions currently underway, what concrete steps would you take or would you recommend to revitalize Morgan Hill's struggling downtown?
Good question. I know the merchants downtown. I know their names. I know their shops. I know their struggles. So we do have to do something, and we have to do it right away. I support the council's project that they have now to have mixed use, where the first level would be retail, the second level of the building would be commercial, and the third would be residential. What I think we need downtown is more entertainment, and I think that will come with a movie theater. And although we all love the Granada, it's not fiscally sound to try to save it, but there's something we could possibly save, like the Marquee, and keep the name and keep it downtown. I also think as people move downtown, we're going to need services such as a dry cleaner and maybe a deli that'll sell milk and eggs and those kind of things. You might not want to do your weekly shopping there, but you certainly want to be downtown. So those are the things I would like to see happen in the very near future.
Thank you. So let's rotate to Larry Carr.
Thank you. I'm I'm not sure I would characterize our downtown as struggling. We have a downtown that is virtually full today with very committed small business owners that are putting their hard work into making downtown successful. And they have a great partnership with not only the Chamber and the Downtown Association, but the City of Morgan Hill. Downtown, the goal and the vision that we as a community have placed for downtown is a place where people live and work and thrive. And so moving forward, passing Measure H on November's ballot will be very important for us to be able to work with the private sector in developing the housing and creating the residential component that will make downtown more vibrant. With the respect to the redevelopment agency of Morgan Hill, our commitment is to improve the infrastructure of downtown so that the businesses in the private sector can do what they do best and make the private sector and businesses work with the public sector providing the infrastructure to make that successful. And with those two components coming together, we will see downtown continue to be the heart and soul of this great community.
Thank you. Mark Razan, your ideas on downtown.
Well, as you, Larry and I serve on the council, so we're in agreement on how we are moving on the downtown. But the RDA and the dollars that we are investing in our downtown is to change the downtown significantly. I think what we're doing right now, the purchasing of the properties and potentially working with in the future with developers and so on to build a mixed-use downtown is going to be fantastic. We call it spectacular, but I think it will change the downtown significantly. The promenade, the infrastructure that we're investing in is very important. The additional parking that we have and going to put in place is very important. But I think the one other thing that I think is very important is that we continue to work with the Chamber of Commerce, we continue to work with the Downtown Association, and the city will take the lead here, and I believe, in organizing and advertising and supporting the downtown. Because I think if you talk to these small business owners, they have a lot of passion for Morgan Hill. I think they lack some organization and direction. So I think we'll support that in the future.
Thank you. So let us start with question number 2, and we will start with Mark Razan this time. Will you, as a city council member, vote only to approve budgets that use Measure G revenues only to fund police services? If not, why not?
No, yes. I will support Measure G, and the funds that go for Measure G are earmarked to go for public safety, and that's what they're going to do, and that's what we're going to fund. I don't see any changes in the future into our economy or whatever that may cause that. Our commitment and my commitment to this community are those funds to be passed under the conditions that we have, which is a majority vote, that we will use those funds exclusively for public safety purposes. That's my commitment, and that's what we'll do.
Ms. Libres.
Well, I also support the measure, and I agree with what Mark said as far as if I'm on the council, I would want these to be used only for public safety. It would be not fair to the voters who put their faith in us as a council to use this money in that direction. And I don't see that it would have to be used any other way. So yes, I would definitely see or try to oversee that it is used for public safety.
Thank you. Mr. Carr.
As the chair of the Public Safety Committee that drafted the measure, I'm glad to hear unanimous support up here for it. I've committed already to that measure and working with the Chief and Mayor Tate and putting together the proposal that became Measure G. I have made a commitment for some time now that revenues that we bring into the city as a result of the passage of Measure G will be committed to public safety. The Chief has laid out a plan of how to improve public safety in Morgan Hill, make sure we're all secure, make sure that our proud men and women of our police force provide the resources that they need to be safe and to provide us security. And it will be my leadership to make sure that that happens once we pass Measure G. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Question number 3. Let us start with Larry Carr. What would be your plans for the southeast quadrant? That's the area around Tennant and 101. Currently under environmental review, and please include your view of how to deal with the agricultural mitigation.
Sure. The southeast quadrant of Morgan Hill has been something we've been dealing with for many years now. In fact, this whole second term of mine on the council, we've been dealing with that. I think we have to continue to work with property owners to find out how we're going to pre-plan that area. We want to make sure that that area is not just developed in a very scattered approach, losing any opportunity to preserve open space that is there today in a way that makes it accessible for Morgan Hill residents, while still valuing the private property rights that the families that own that property have. The agricultural mitigations that we've worked with the county on will provide some protections for that open space. But as a member of the Utilities and Environment Committee, we've asked to explore ways that the city can be more involved to make sure that agriculture can in fact be profitable in this area, and how can the city be involved in making sure that local agriculture used locally is a profitable venture.
Thank you very much. Let me see. We're on to Mark Razan.
Well, the city is currently studying the viability of the southeast quadrant. I have always been an advocate for preserving the open space out there. I'm also an advocate for preserving agriculture out there. I think it's viable. I think that we have examples in other communities where local agriculture, organic, heirloom, and other types of agriculture, working closely with our community, working closely with our restaurants. I see that potentially that the city becomes a brokering agent for our local agriculture, to having them sell products directly to restaurants, sell products directly to businesses, directly to our grocery stores, directly to our school districts, and so on. I think we have to change the way we do agriculture. If you talk to some of the farmers out there, they are ingredient farmers. They don't understand the new type of farming that we could have to support our local businesses and so on. So I think I'm willing to work with them and having them look at how we can support local agriculture and preserve our southeast quadrant.
Thank you. Ms. Liebers.
Thank you. Well, it's my understanding that that area is being looked at as recreation facilities, and that is very exciting for our community. And I understand also that 200 acres of that is already preserved as open space. How would we work with the farmers? I think it's very important that they be able to make their living at farming. Farming is already a very, very hard job, and it gets harder and harder. So we would need to work with them to come to a compromise where we are not insisting they sell their property, that they can continue to farm, that is going to be something that is financially, economically, and something that they will be able to continue to maintain their lives by farming. So I think we need to explore it more. I'd be interested to hear what the environmental report will be, and I know that's going on right now.
Thank you. So that is the end of our three prepared questions. We have 3 questions from the audience. And Ms. Liebers has the first question. How would you improve the city's working relationship with the school district?
Good question. The city right now is probably not as involved as the school district as they could be. I would like to see that to be a closer relationship through perhaps liaisons that attend the school board meetings, talk to the trustees, and know exactly what the issues are with the cities. I know with the school district, I know as a Parks and Recs commissioner, it comes before our commission all the time about use of the fields in the schools and in the sports complex that we've built out on Condit. So it's very important that we form a partnership, and we have to extend that invitation to the school to know more about what their needs are.
Thank you. And let us go now to former school board member Larry Carr.
Thanks, Karen. Well, we know from some polling that we did back in the spring that schools and education in Morgan Hill is the #1 issue, according to residents of Morgan Hill. And we've struggled with this somewhat, to be honest with you. We've struggled with this. I serve, along with Mayor Tate, on the City School Liaison Committee, of which we try to address issues. It's very difficult for the city to find ways to improve education, to just say we're going to improve education. So we try to find partnerships and ways that we can work with the school district. One of those is in public safety. We provide school resource officers to the schools, and we have provided an anti-gang program down into the middle schools and now into elementary schools this year to try to work with those schools. I think we have to work with the school board, but more particularly with principals. We have to get out to particular school sites and find out what are the things that those school sites need in those neighborhoods, because we have neighborhood schools in Morgan Hill, to improve both those school sites and the services that are then being provided to those neighborhoods.
Thank you. Mark Grazan?
Well, there's a lot of things we could be doing with the school districts. More importantly, there's a lot of things we could have done with the school districts that we didn't do. That is, collaborating with them with their construction of new sites and so on. I think we could have collaborated with them to build our aquatic center with them. We could have had a Olympic pool at one of the other sites, and that would be a recreation pool as well as a school pool. We didn't do that. I believe we develop our athletic fields in cooperation with the schools, that we then, have a city portion and a school portion. But I think by having both agencies work together, we could actually have a better, bigger facility than either one of us could have done alone. We could have school parks together, and other agencies have done that. And we can collaborate with them and provide services with them, after-school recreation activities for the school, that are in the school. So when the kids get out of class, they don't get sent home and wander off home. There are actually programs in the schools that Parks and Recreation supports. A lot we can do.
Thank you. Moving on to our second audience question. This is a fairly lengthy question, but I'll try to read it fast. And let us start with Mark Grazan. Why is the city continuing to forge ahead with its aggressive spending programs, i.e. the Santa Teresa extension, the Dunn widening project, the recent furniture expenditure, particularly in light of the current economic crisis, which includes falling housing prices, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay. First of all, the Santa Teresa project, we're still waiting for a traffic study to tell us whether that is a necessary project or not. We'll wait for that study, and then we'll look at alternatives. That's not a done deal by any means, even though they may say that the thoroughfare needs to go through. I think there's alternatives for us to explore. Two, the Dunn Avenue widening is very important. That is a portion of the road that is narrow in some areas and wider in other areas, and there's some areas there that don't have sidewalks at all. So it's really, for me, it's a safety issue. Widening that thoroughfare, putting sidewalks, means kids walk on sidewalks, not on streets. We need to do that. And what was the other part of the other question?
It's an audience question.
The
recent furniture expenditure?
Furniture expenditure.
Yeah.
I think council was very fair on that. We looked at alternatives. We actually opened it up for a local agency to then bid on it. I know there were problems, whatever. But I think if you look at this, it was bid to a contract, and the price that we got for that contract was provided by law. And I think we did okay in that regard.
Thank you. Marilyn Liebers.
Yeah, that's got a lot of questions built into one. On the Santa Teresa extension, like Mark said, that is not a done deal, but it has been in the books for a long time, and it's certainly something we need to investigate. Butterfield opened up a whole corridor, which was wonderful for the flow of traffic in the downtown area. And so that extension on Santa Teresa will open up another corridor, but it still needs a lot of investigation. And I agree with Mark wholeheartedly on Dunn Avenue. We need to have sidewalks, gutter, sewer along in those areas that are just kind of dirt on the side of the road. It's a plain safety issue as far as I see it. And the third question on the furniture, it was put out to bid, and the council voted on it. And what I have to say is, in our economic times, we can't afford to buy junk. We bought very quality furniture that will last a very long time, so I support that they did spend this money on this furniture.
Thank you. Mr. Carr.
Well, first, let me address the source of these funds. All of these dollars for those projects that were mentioned in the question come from either redevelopment agency or impact fees. So they are dollars that can only be used on capital or infrastructure improvements and cannot be used in our general fund or for any kind of operating dollars. So impact fees are collected when there is an impact in a certain area and are supposed to, by law, be spent on that. So that's why we look at things like the widening of Dunn, as we try to become more pedestrian friendly in a community that supports keeping the library at its current location. When we made that decision, that also, in my mind, made the decision that we needed to improve the corridors to get to the library so that people could get to this library. One of those is the improvement of Dunn Avenue. Santa Teresa will be a project that will look at the traffic studies and work with the neighborhood and how that would best be accommodated should the traffic studies and the traffic models require it. When it came to the furniture that we purchased for the development center that's going in next door, Marilyn's right. The city of Morgan Hill is too poor to be cheap. We can't risk buying cheaper furniture overseas. So I supported buying an American-made, tried-and-true product that we know will last for the test of time and therefore save taxpayers money in the long run.
Thank you. And our last question. Let us start with Mr. Carr. What are the 3 key actions that the city can take to reduce global warming?
Great question, and I'm proud to have been one of the authors of our environmental agenda, the first time that the city of Morgan Hill has looked holistically at our community and how we are dealing with the environment and trying to become a more sustainable community. We're doing that in a couple of ways. How do we improve in green building practices? We're trying to be a role model in that, and the building next door will be a LEED certified building. Our aquatic center is a LEED certified building. Public projects will have minimum standards, and we hope much higher than those. We're trying to get then the private sector to follow that in a voluntary manner at first, and if we don't get the kind of gains that we need, we may have to look at ways to sort of up the ante in order to do that. We're looking at our redevelopment, or our residential development control system as a way that we can give points to home developers to build green, and as a model for doing that. We also are looking at water and how do we preserve water and be more conscious about our water use in Morgan Hill.
Thank you. Mr. Grazan.
I think it's very important to build at our core. This is smart growth. I think our Measure H that we have before the voters, adding 500 units within our downtown, is really what building green is about. Reduces traffic, congestions, and other things. It is part of smart growth. It's a smart philosophy. I believe we need to adopt green building standards, LEED standards for the community here. We need to do that. We need to look at transportation. Transportation is a very big contributor to global warming. We look at local transportation and how we can do that. I look at things that we can do as drought-tolerant native California plants and trees along our median strips, getting rid of lawns and so on, I think we need to plant 10,000 trees in Morgan Hill very quickly here. Trees are very good to reduce global warming, giving us a green canopy for when we have issues of heat coming in our way. So there are a lot of things that we're going to do. I think the environmental agenda that we have before our residents today is the most dramatic changes we're going to bring to Morgan Hill in a long time.
Thank you. Ms. Libres.
Yes, as being part of the design team for both the Aquatic Center and the CRC, the Centennial Recreation Center, environmentally friendly building was our highest priority, and like Larry mentioned, they are LEEDs approved, and so is this new project that's going in right next door to us. There's also a housing development that's being considered out in the Cochrane area that will be a complete green build, so I'm very proud of that. In case any of you didn't notice, City Hall and all public buildings don't allow plastic water bottles anymore, so that's a step we've taken that I think is very positive. I would like to see, I think the housing downtown, the 500 units, will reduce traffic, and like Mark said, that is one of the biggest contributors to our environment, and so I think that is a very, very positive step as far as ways that we can make our whole earth more environmentally friendly.
Thank you. That is it for our questions. We would now like each one of the candidates to spend 1 minute on a closing statement. Let us begin with Marilyn Libres.
Well, thank you very much for organizing this and allowing me to come. I hope all of you have gotten to know me a little bit better and see what I stand for. Last week I was talking to a gentleman here in Morgan Hill that I have the utmost respect for, and I asked him if he had any hints for me for tonight. And he said, yes, know where the camera is. And I went, okay. And then I thought about it. And I thought, you know, I'm not just talking to you folks here. I'm talking to the folks at home, too, that are watching this on TV. And if I become elected, I want to build relationships with the citizens of Morgan Hill. So whether you're here at a council meeting or a committee meeting, or whether you're watching at home from TV, or if I see you downtown walking on the street, I want to build that relationship. I think my relationship with the citizens will be my strength, but but most importantly, it'll be my accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. And Larry Carr.
Thank you. This November's election is so important. I urge all of you to consider the issues before you, the candidates before you very carefully. October 20th is the deadline to register to vote. If you're not yet registered, please do so. I'm honored to be endorsed by the Morgan Hill Police Officers Association, the Morgan Hill and Santa Clara County Firefighters Association, the Morgan Hill Times, our own Mayor Steve Tate, and County Supervisor Don Gage. I've provided experience and trusted leadership over the years, and I'm proud of that service. We've obtained amazing goals for the city of Morgan Hill and have really moved us forward in the aspect of our quality of life in Morgan Hill. But there's a lot to be done. The experience I continue to bring will be invaluable as we face the challenges that the economy is going to be facing and that will affect the budget of Morgan Hill. I have a track record of success, of open and accessibility. We may not always agree on every issue, but you can always be sure that I'll listen and I'll consider all the issues before voting. So please, on November 4th, make sure you get out, you cast your vote, and I'd be honored if you'd consider me.
Thank you very much. Mark Grisson.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would be remiss tonight if I didn't acknowledge our nation's financial crisis. There's a crisis in the housing market. We have seen the stock market plummet in the recent days. Main Street of Morgan Hill is not immune from any of these disasters. That is why I've supported a strong reserve, a $10 million reserve to draw upon when times are tough. We are already seeing a decline in some sectors of our sales tax. As property values decline, we will see less revenue come to city coffers. With 25 years of public finance administration, I believe I can help sustain this community in difficult times and provide needed leadership and resolve. And amongst all these challenges, if I were to ask you one question, are we better today from a local perspective than we were 4 years ago? I think you would agree that we are. That is why I'm asking for your support to continue the good work we've begun and support my candidacy for re-election. I will campaign vigorously for your support because I believe in this community, its good people, and its values. I will remain a fiscal conservative while moving forward with economic incentives to ensure good jobs, housing, and business. I will remain a strong advocate for our environmental and health issues and a protector of youth and senior services while working hard to preserve our precious open space. I thank you very much.
And I'd like to thank the candidates for their thoughtful answers and the audience for their attention. Next up is Lisa Pampich.
So I'd like to invite the Open Space Authority candidates to come up.
Hi. Hello. How are you?
Sir. So running for open space, we have the incumbent, Alex Kennett, who's a realtor and who has his BS in chemistry and his MA in history. And challenging him is Shanna Boygan, a realtor who has a BA from San Francisco State, who is a volunteer in a community and who works with the Santa Clara County Association of Realtors on their Government Relations Committee. Thanks for coming tonight. I'd like to ask you each to do your opening statement, starting with Ms. Boygan.
Well, good evening, and thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been quite interesting for me to be on the other side of the fence since I've worked with the government relations with the realtors and with the state PTA, and it's fun to be on, it's interesting to be on the other side. I just wanted to say, as part of that too, is one of the things that I am as a deacon at the Presbyterian Church, and the deacons are the servers. And so that's my background, is serving others, and how can you bring everybody together for a common goal. We have a lot of interests in our environment. When John Laird invited me to his environmental symposium, I said, everybody asked me, aren't you uncomfortable? You're a realtor. And I said, no, I probably care more about the environment than anyone in the room because I care about all of it. And so some people have asked me, because of my work with the task force that had to do with agriculture and the task force that had to do with our view shed, the task force as the county has invited me to sit on different ones and bringing people together in our housing coalition, working with people from all different walks of life, from all different agencies, and have come together, and that's my forte, is getting everybody to come and work together so that we can resolve some of the issues that we have and maintain our open space and respect property rights.
Thank you. Mr. Kennett.
Thank you very much. I see this as an environmental position. In the 7+ years I've been in it, I feel like I'm kind of at the top of my game as an environmentalist that has to use the political process to get there. The Open Space Authority serves Santa Clara County by protecting sensitive lands, preserving natural communities, and managing open space in ways that also promotes agriculture and compatible recreation. I helped write that statement. It's the mission of the Open Space Authority, and I so believe in the balance of the economy and the environment. Let's face it, if you have clean air and what good is all the money in the world if you can't have clean air and clean water? However, if you can't afford the glass to put that water in, what good is it? 29 years in the community. Some of you know me from as being the head of the 4th of July Committee here in town, and Chamber of Commerce, and on the Urban Limit Line Committee as well. I too, as a realtor, I'm a fellow realtor, and I realize that the quality that Morgan Hill represents helps keep us at the pinnacle of communities that people want to move to. And so I like to be part of that and continue to be part of that for the Open Space Authority as well in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question, we'll start with Mr. Kennett. Now that the Open Space Authority's tax measure has been overturned, how should it go about replacing those revenues?
Well, there's a variety of ways. One thing I push for all along is not just to go back to the same well each and every time, all the way to taxes. There's other options. There's grants. There's user fees perhaps can be used. It'll be a variety of things, not one solution. 66% of the people voted for the measure. We won in the Superior Court. We won in an appellate court. We didn't do so well with the Supremes, but life goes on, and so shall we.
Thank you. Ms. Boygan?
Well, all along, and everywhere that I've gone, and working with the Coyote Valley Task Force, and again with the Williamson Act, everywhere I went, and people talked to me and would come up to me and say, gee, some of the things you said actually made more sense than anyone else. And part of that is saying, okay, if this is what you want open space and you want this, then with showing respect to the landowners and what can they do to maintain their land. We talked earlier this evening about how to make agriculture a continual viable resource in this community. And then asking the people that are involved, okay, it's that old saying of then put your money where your mouth is. If you're concerned about this, then it's setting up situations where people can contribute to having the open space that they want and paying for it.
Okay. We're going to start with Ms. Boygan on the next question. Besides the funding issue, what is the Open Space Authority's greatest challenge in the next 4 years, and why?
I think probably the greatest challenge is maintaining what they have and keeping that and making it more accessible to the community. Somebody said to me, I think the Open Space Authority is probably one of the best kept secrets in our county. I've had more people come up and ask me, what is it they do? And so I said, if nothing else, challenging Alex, and Alex and I are friends, that says, we're going to stir up the pot. We're going to have people aware of the parks, of the ability to get out there and have kids being able to use these facilities. And that's one of the challenges, is how to get it out there and preserve the areas that we need to preserve, and continue to work with the green belts and the things that we want to have to maintain open space, and where do we fund it.
Thank you. Mr. Kennett?
Well, in the time I've been on the board, we've increased our land holdings from 3,000 acres to 14,000 acres. And our biggest challenge is really coming from being an acquisition organization to being a maintenance organization, and the various ways that we can maintain, and the different ways that we can buy land. For instance, we don't need to own the land in fee simple. We've helped many of the farmers and ranchers, especially in Santa Clara County, be able to maintain their lands by buying the development rights. So we give them a percent of money that allows them to not only continue what they do for a living, being in the agricultural business, but also to keep the land in open space in perpetuity.
Great, that concludes our prepared questions, and now I'll move to questions from the audience, starting with Mr. Kennett. Some in the Santa Clara County community have suggested that the Open Space Authority should be disbanded as an organization. What are your views on this move? Do you support it or not?
No, I don't support it. Your turn.
No, I don't support it. Can we move on? No.
That was easy.
We probably kind of agree on that. Could I, why don't you go ahead?
No, that's it.
I was just gonna
Do I
say,
support it or no? No, I'm a very succinct person.
Well, and I think in this particular instance, Alex and I are the same. And that's one of the things that, just like with our city council and our assembly, you need a place where people can come and be organized and express their opinions on what they need to do. I just like to see some more transparency with the board so that people are more aware of what they're doing, because they do a good job.
Okay. Our last audience question, and we'll start with Ms. Boygan. What OSA properties have you actually visited, and how many OSA or Citizens Advisory meetings have you attended in the last 2 years?
I haven't attended a lot of the meetings. I've gotten the notes and the minutes, and I've read them because I've been attending Williamson-Act meetings and Coyote Valley meetings and perchlorate meetings and the Housing Action Coalition meetings, and somebody asked me, when do you run a real estate business? So but I've gone online and I've read the minutes because they post them. So I've tried to keep abreast of what they're doing and what's going on. And I've visited just about all of the parks in the county and the areas, and some of them are set aside for it's not just for people and use in open space and us to look at. It's again, one of the big discussions we had is the difference of open space for public enjoyment and for public use. And when you're talking about easements, that's for enjoyment. So we had big discussions about that so that people could understand what the differences are.
Thank you. Mr. Kennett.
Pardon me for being succinct again, but all of them. Needless to say, I've been on the lands even before they became our lands. I was on the acquisition committee for 6 out of my 8 years on the board. I was on the committee that in Rancho Canada del Oro, where you have the only path specifically designed. It's a little over a half a mile long, specifically designed for people who are wheelchair bound, who can still enjoy what we have to offer. It's a very unique position.
Great, thank you. And now we'll move to closing statements, starting with Mr. Kennett.
Thank you. Well, you've been told, needless to say, you expect to get out there and vote. And in honor of my wife's hometown of Chicago, I'll only say vote early and vote for me. I won't add the third one, and I do appreciate it. This is, again, the political process for an environmental issue. My endorsements are manyfold, both sides of the aisle. I'm going to read a statement. Alex Kennett has worked hard over the years to keep all members of the various interests well informed and involved in complicated issues of growth here in South Santa Clara County. That was written by George Kiala, one of the landed families here, and I'm very proud of that. We work together. We've been on opposite sides of the issue, but one of my strengths is getting people to the table and keeping them there. So thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing to work with you, not taking that for granted.
Okay. Well, my endorsements include Don Gage and Pete McHugh, our supervisors, and the Farm Bureau from my work with them, and the Cattlemen's Association and the Hillside Group and our Santa Clara County Association of Realtors, and a bunch of families and friends and farmers and the of people that own land and people that are involved and concerned about the environment and how do we maintain these ranches in these areas. And again, when I worked on the Williamson Act, it was getting people to come together to come up with a new ordinance that was going to service everybody. And one of the things we came up with, and it was my idea, was developing a conversion to open space. So property owners could do that. So I want to thank you again for letting me come this evening. This was really fun. I've enjoyed this. And please get out and vote, and I hope you vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you both for coming.
Thank
we
you.
Appreciate your time. Now I'd like to invite the Measure G opponent and proponent, Mayor Tate and Art College, to step forward. Thanks. So this evening, we're going to discuss Measure G, a utility tax measure on the ballot. And speaking in favor of the measure is Mayor Steve Tate. Speaking against is Resident Art College. So I'd like to start with opening statements, starting with Mr. College.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the American Association of University Women and the Morgan Hill Times for this opportunity to speak to the citizens of Morgan Hill. This utility tax has nothing to do with the police department. They're not responsible for the deficits in parks and recreation. The projected deficit for the next 5 years is an additional $8.8 million. We need a strong and well-supported police department in Morgan Hill. Unfortunately, this utility tax, when it fails, will cause the police department to take the brunt of it. Public safety is always on a chopping block when the council wants to get into your pocket or purse for additional taxes. The real issue has to do with the failings of this council, specifically the mayor, Steve Tate, and members Greg Sellers and Larry Carr. In 1999, the city was successful in extending the RDA. Citizens asked how these facilities would be maintained and self-sustaining, and these 3 council members gave their word, pledged to the voters, that the projects would be fiscally sound, the RDA would not sell bonds, and the city would not raise taxes. All of these promises have been broken. Since the expansion in '99, the RDA has been bleeding off over $3 million a year from the general fund. In addition, the RDA steals on an annual basis $10 million from the school district, $1 million from the county library, and $1.2 million from Gavilan Community College. Public safety is not their highest priority. It's saving parks and recreation. City Hall can't even be honest about what the real issue is. This tax is not even dedicated to the police department. Instead, their flyers say it's to help protect general city services, meaning they can spend it anywhere.
Thank you. Mayor Tate.
Well, thank you to the AAUW. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and endorse everybody getting out on November 4th and voting. Measure G is for public safety. Let me repeat that. Measure G is for public safety. We have a council public safety committee that studied police staffing needs intently for about 16 months. We found that although we are safe today, there are many indications that as we grow, as our city is growing, our safety is increasingly threatened. And I think you see some of that in the increased gang activity, the increased drug activity, just the overall increase in the number of arrests that we have. Now, Morgan Hill is very fortunate to have 38 sworn officers on the police department. They are outstanding. But we also have a population of 39,200 as of the beginning of the year. You do the math, you find that you have less than 1 officer per 1,000 population. The guidelines, what they want you to have is 1.5 per 1,000 population. We have less than 1. So the committee and the council, the committee took the recommendation to the council, and we concluded that we would be irresponsible not to address the situation. Without the money to address it, we have to address it by asking for this measure to be passed. Again, it's about public safety. This measure is about public safety, and I'll do some more in my conclusion. Thank you.
Okay, for the first question, we will start with Mr. Mayor Tate. Do you believe that the current City Council exhausted other cost savings options, such as contracting with the county sheriff for police services, or moving to a consolidated dispatch system before placing a utility tax on the ballot? Why or why not?
Do I believe that we adequately addressed all those alternatives?
Exhausted other cost-saving options.
Well, yeah, I just said that we had 16 months worth of study as a committee and as a council, and yeah, we studied all viable options. You have to understand that of our budget for the general fund that we can spend on public safety, we spend 83% of it on public safety. We have to look at other alternatives. We looked at all those alternatives of further cost cutting, found that none of them would be effective, and that to increase the staffing to not the level recommended, but the level that we felt was needed to really address the needs within the city, we would have to go and ask the voters to support a 2% utility users tax, not a 5% like Gilroy and San Jose have, but a 2% tax. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. College?
It won't be temporary, and it won't stay at 2% for long. After breaking their past pledges, how can these council members be trusted to run the city in the future?
That wasn't the question you were asked.
Excuse me, I'm getting to that. Their flyers say that the $1.6 million that they are asking for in this tax represents 6% of the general fund. It also states that the city cannot enhance city service levels without new revenues. If these council members can't make 6% worth of cuts to the general fund, then they aren't qualified to serve and be in control of a multi-million-dollar city budget consisting of taxpayers' money. Now they want us to reward their incompetence by giving them more taxpayers' money to waste. Those being asked to fund the council's reckless spending are taking substantially bigger cuts, loss of jobs, loss of homes, and loss of retirement. It's unthinkable that they would ask the council, the citizens, for a tax increase with the uncertainty of the state budget and the federal fiscal crisis looming over us. Thank you.
Before I move to the next question, I'll remind you to please respond to the question that you were asked. What will happen to police services in Morgan Hill if Measure G fails? We'll start with Mr. College.
Well, if they're true to what they say, then they'd obviously have to cut the police services to balance their budget. However, again, that's what I say, the issue is not the police department, it's the Parks and Recreation Department. And if they cut the Parks and Recreation Department, that just proves that we were right all along. They don't need this utility tax. They have ample ways to support the police department. This is the wrong way to do it. Keep asking for money and keep asking for money. When is it going to stop? And the people out here that have to pay these fees only have so much to go around. And in the middle of like I said, a financial crisis for the state and the federal government, we're being asked to take more money out of our pockets and put it together in the city. And I can't say that they've spent what they have responsibly.
Thank you. Mayor Tate?
Measure G doesn't pass, what we have in place now will remain in place. We're not going to cut anything. We will keep in place what we have now. We will go back to the drawing boards to see what the other alternatives are. If there are any, we think we've kind of studied them all. We will be worse off if Measure G does not pass. As we grow, we're going to need the additional officers. This is the best way that we have found to pay for them. We're asking it once, we're asking for only 2%, and we have dedicated and pledged, and I think you heard many of the candidates pledge that that money is going to go to public safety. That is our pledge to you.
Thank you. We'll now move to some audience questions. Start with Mayor Tate. What will happen if Measure G does not provide enough funding for keeping up with public safety considerations in the future, 10 years or so?
10 years from now, I don't know about that one. What we have in Measure G is a review every 2 years by the city council. Your elected officials, your local elected officials, the city council will review it every 2 years. 4 out of the 5 members of the city council have to say we want to keep this in place. They might find in some of their reviews that we got to go start looking at other places for more revenues, but we do think that this is the solution that we need for right now and will tide us over for quite a long period of time.
Thank you. Mr. College?
Asking additional taxes and asking for additional taxes is not the responsible way to address these issues. We need to be able to control and balance our budget like any other organization and operation. This city does not want to do that. They want to keep coming back and asking for more taxes. And again, it's got to stop somewhere. There's got to be some accountability in what's taken place and where it's going.
Thank you. Mr. College, do you believe that recreation services help improve public safety?
To a certain extent, yes. But again, when these facilities were built, they were supposed to be self-sustaining. The city council ignored that and built them anyway. Now they're bleeding to the tune of $1.5 million a year away from the general fund to fund police and fire. And that is an important part of safety for this community and for the children in this community. Yes, they could have built the first 3 or 4 projects and probably been fiscally sound in this community, but they decided to build all 10 of them. There was no mandate from the people at the time to do this. That was perpetuated by the city council because they put all of the projects on the ballot at the same time so that you had to vote for all of them if you wanted yours built. And then they came back and said they had a mandate. It was never there.
Thank you. Mayor Tate?
Well, I'm here to talk about public safety. I did not come here to really talk about recreation, but I will spend a minute talking about it because we're extremely proud of the recreation that we have and offer here. We are the envy of so many communities around here. Chief Cumming calls our recreation facilities crime prevention facilities. Crime prevention requires the kind of partnerships that we have with our rec department so that there are alternative activities and people are not out committing crimes. Of the money spent on recreation in the city of Morgan Hill, we recover 74% of the money we spend. The national average recovery rate for recreation programs in cities is 34%. We are extremely proud, and again, the envy of many communities in our environment because of how well we are doing on recreation. I know of absolutely no community support to not maintain our recreation facilities. We could get $1.5 million if we dropped them, but nobody wants that.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to closing statements. We'll start with Mayor Tate.
Okay. One thing about Measure G is that it's a local measure. That means that your city council will control those monies. We are committed to putting them into public safety and police staffing specifically. That is our commitment. And the local review that we do every 2 years, 4/5 have to say we got to keep doing this. That is very meaningful because it is local. You guys look at us. You guys are here tonight. You're watching us. And we will be watched when we have this measure in place, and we will be accountable for it. The Police Officers Association are the spearheads of the campaign to get Measure G passed. They're the ones that are out knocking on your doors asking for your support. And who best can represent what is needed in the police department from a staffing viewpoint than our own police officers themselves? They know the need for additional safety services, additional cops on patrol, additional police in the city of Morgan Hill. We need it. We need Measure G. Please support it.
Thank you. Mr. College.
Over the years, the CRDA has become a political slush fund for council members to dole out to their cronies, out-of-town consultants, and to town developers. Local businesses in the downtown do not speak about the abuses and muses because they're afraid of retaliation. Now the CRDA wants to extend Santa Teresa Boulevard through the heart of the city. The price tag to start with $12 million, total $24 million. If this is done, then they should really look at the monies being allocated and distributed to the downtown businesses struggling to survive. Grants ranging from $100,000 to $400,000 could and should be made available to these businesses. Allow these businesses to have a say in their future and to develop a sense of personal pride. They can't wait for another 40 years. Mayor Tate says Measure G opponents are comparing apples and oranges. It is not apples and oranges. Doesn't make any difference which pocket you take it out of, Mr. Tate. It's still taxpayers' money. This is not a public safety issue or parks and recreation. It's only symptoms of the real disease, and that's the misuse of the RDA. They've deceived the public about the real issues behind this utility tax. Their incompetence and poor decisions.
Time is up. Thank you both for coming. I appreciate it. And thank everyone for coming. I'd like to turn it over to Margot and Bobby.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm sure we all have a better understanding of the issues and a much better idea of who all the candidates are. We want to thank the candidates, the Morgan Hill Times, the City of Morgan Hill, and Cable Channel 17 for engaging in this critical part of democracy. If you need some more unbiased information about the election, check out the website of the League of Women Voters. It's www.smartvoter.org. You're also invited to stay afterwards to meet the candidates and pose any questions that you didn't get a chance to pose during our session. Please remember, the last day to register is next Monday, October 20th. Election day is Tuesday, November 4th. And for my husband, absentee ballots require 59 cents postage, dear. So please exercise our wonderful right and vote.
Ditto to all of that, and thank you all for coming, and please do stay around. We do have the room till 9 o'clock, so if you wish to stay and ask questions, we're happy to have you do that. Thanks so much.
Thank you.